And Palm Sunday, really from almost the very beginning of the church, we have record of Christians getting together to celebrate him coming into the city. It was on this day, roughly 2,000 years ago, that Jesus marched into the city. And there's 4 different stories about Jesus' life: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And all those stories tell pretty much the same deal, that he came in and appeared. But the Bible seems to give this notion that people had a different take on Jesus than what he really was. They assumed that he was going to come to be a king. In fact, even the phrasing of it, triumphal entry, borrows from the Romans. Romans did triumphal entries when the king would come in, and it borrows from that. And this notion that maybe Jesus is coming in to be a king in the city, that he's going to kick the Romans out and rule a new Jerusalem, or at the very least be a religious kind of a king that would inaugurate some new era in Jerusalem for years and years and years. And people are all looking forward to that deal, and that's not at all what Jesus has in mind. It really is kind of a case of mistaken identity. They're putting things on Jesus that really aren't who he is. And I don't know if it's ever happened to you. Have you ever been mistaken for somebody else? If people see you and think that you're somebody that you're not, it can be kind of embarrassing or frustrating. You always hope it'll be something like Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt. No, it's just me, but that's never happened to me, and that doesn't normally probably happen to very many of you. Normally, if you're mistaken for somebody, you're at Walmart and they're asking where the light bulbs are. They think you work there. It's normally that kind of thing. But occasionally, there'll be some case of mistaken identity that will kind of rattle your cage a little bit. When we were in California, we were driving home from California. When we lived there, we're driving home, and we broke down in Oklahoma, just a little bit outside of Joplin, Missouri. And my dad, who lives in Paoli, drove to get us because we were broke down, got the car repaired there. It was going to take a week to get it fixed. They were going to repair the car there. Dad came and got us in Joplin and brought us home. And he gets there, it's like, I don't know, it's 9:30 or 10 or 11 o'clock before we take off to head back this direction. And he says, I said, do you want to just stay the night? You'll get a hotel here in this little town in Oklahoma. He goes, no, let's just get down the road. Okay, so we hop in the car and take off. It's about 11:30 when we're rolling through Joplin, and I wasn't really going that fast when the policeman came in behind me there. And I can go fast. I mean, I'm not denying that's a part of my personality. I could certainly do that. But I wasn't me. It's Dad's car, and he's right there with me. And so it's kind of embarrassing, to get pulled over in a situation like that. And he pulls me over, and we go up to the side of the road, and he stays behind me for a little while. It's kind of uncomfortably long before he gets out of his car. Has the bright lights on, so I can't really see very well what he's doing back there. And then when he comes out like this, walks up to my car like he's ready to shoot. When he gets up there, and I see him coming that way, so it's really nervous. I had my window rolled down already, had my hands on the steering wheel, nervous where we were headed with this whole thing. And he gets up and he looks in the window. Oh, never mind, you have a good night. And he walks away. And I said, what? He goes, yeah, we thought you were somebody else. You drive safe. And so I don't know who the other guy was, but I really feel like, literally dodged a bullet there. I think it could have been a whole different deal. And he was sure that I was, a gangster or something, some rough dude. And so it kind of gave us something to talk about once we gathered ourselves together there after he left on our way home. But normally when you're mistaken, it's not, for a good thing. And that's what happens to Jesus. They assume he's going to come in and be some kind of a king and make things happen and really make them more prosperous, make them more rich, make them more, important. And that's not really his intent. And the stories about Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, they all tell a lot of the same details. They say that Jesus rode in on a colt, just a young donkey there. He kind of comes in humble. It says that the people waved palm branches. I want to thank Billy and Steve Boshiers for buying some palms for us for Palm Sunday and for Easter. And they were waving the palm branches, which can seem like kind of an insignificant detail to us today, but we know when the Israelites, when they rebelled against the Greeks, when the Greeks owned Israel, when they rebelled against them, and then when they rebelled against the Romans, they did it a couple different times, and especially in 60s when Rome finally comes in and conquers, just flattens Jerusalem. During all those times, they would mint their own coins, and the palm leaf was kind of their symbol of resistance. You know, you think about like the snake, it says, "Don't tread on me," that symbol, and you see the symbol, and it evokes certain things in your head. The palm branch was like that for Israel. And so when they're waving these palm branches, it's not a completely unpolitical thing they're doing. I mean, and the Gospels record that they do that they're all cheering for him. They're yelling, "Hosanna," which means, "Lord, save us," but they're yelling it at Jesus. And save us from who? You know, the Romans. And it's a very, all four Gospels, and that's kind of an interesting thing. The four stories about Jesus, they don't all tell the same stories. They talk about the cross, but they all disagree on some things. I mean, disagree is the wrong word. They don't disagree, but they cover different things. Like the book of Mark and the book of John don't talk about Christmas at all. Don't they mention the manger or any of that story. They just kind of skip right over that. It's interesting what they include and what they leave out. But all four Gospels talk about this. Jesus comes into town the week before he's crucified, and it's a huge parade. People are waving palm branches. People think he's the answer. And Jesus doesn't take it well. In Luke, it mentions that he's crying when he comes in. He says, it says he mutters, and the people near him can hear him saying it. He's praying for the city as he comes in. He says, "If you'd only known what would bring you peace, but you didn't." It's just like he has no interest in becoming what they want him to become. They're wanting him to be this king, and he's just not wanting to do it, at least not the way that they're wanting him to do it. And so I started thinking about that. I have been here since 2008. Every year since I came here in 2008, when I have preached on this Sunday, the Sunday before Easter, we've preached about Palm Sunday. There's been no variation about it. If you've been here most or all that time, you've heard me talk about this thing before. And I worry about stuff like that as a speaker. I had a guy a couple of years ago who really only comes Easter. That's the only time he ever comes to our church. But he was here a few Easters ago, and he says, "I've been here several times. You preach the same sermon every time." And I said, "Well, yeah, but..." Well, never mind. But I wanted to say something about it because, like, there's a reason, but you know, it's hard to explain. But on Palm Sunday, I do it too. And, you know, I do it too. And if this is the only Sunday you ever come, it's Palm Sunday. Like, man, we've heard this. You know, I could see why you'd think that. So I was trying to think about some new way to talk about it that I hadn't talked about before. You know, is there some new wrinkle in there that I could talk about? And I did think about that part that Jesus, he's kind of reluctant to be what they want him to be. And there's a lot of, if you're into like superhero movies or fantasy or science fiction kind of movies, if you're into that sort of thing, it's kind of a common trope that pops up in those movies, a little story that they do where the hero's kind of reluctant to go and do, you know, Frodo tells Gandalf, "I wish the ring had never come to me." And Spider-Man, there's a Spider-Man movie where he throws the costume in a trash can there. He's not going to be Spider-Man anymore. And he's got all these powers, but he's just reluctant to do it. And I've always thought that's kind of a silly, stupid thing. I think if I was Spider-Man, I'd be using it all the time. I'd be preaching from up there. I would, "What, you can't do this too? Oh, okay." And every day I would be finding new reasons to swing and crawl around. But it's common. There's a Superman movie where Superman doesn't want to be Superman anymore. And he's not going to be that way. And Luke Skywalker's not sure if he really wants to do it. And even the Dune movie, you know, the main guy, Paul, he's not sure he wants to be the Messiah that they want him to be. And it's just a common thing you see in these kinds of movies. It's so common, in fact, it's hard to think of a franchise that doesn't. Harry Potter wasn't really excited about it. It's just hard to think of a franchise where they don't do that. You know, it's just a common thing. And you could think, well, that's what Jesus is doing. Right? They want to be king, and he's just kind of reluctant, you know, to jump in there. He's got all this power, and I could think about that. And there are some parts of that, I guess, maybe that's a little bit true, but it's not exactly the same thing, because what Jesus is wanting to do is harder than what they're wanting him to do. It's going to require more. It's going to cost him more. He's going to lose more. So it doesn't really totally fit the pattern. It's interesting that they even choose Jesus to be this guy, to be the next big general who's going to come in and kick butt, because the Romans were brutal. I mean, the Romans, if they thought you were getting ready to rebel, they came in hard and came in hard for hundreds of years. I mean, had a long track record of putting down rebellions hard. And so if you're going to get behind somebody, you want to make sure they can get it done. And Jesus really has never shown that aspect of his personality, if that makes sense. I mean, he's a great teacher, and he's commanding in a way. I mean, there's for sure. But like the first time they try to make him king is when he feeds 5,000 people. And it just seems like an interesting leap to go from that to, hey, you could be the guy to beat the Romans. I don't know if it makes sense or not. Like if the Dogwood Festival's in Orleans in a couple weeks, and if you went to Orleans for the Dogwood Festival and a guy was there and he fed 5,000 people out of a bucket of chicken, that's impressive, but you probably wouldn't think, hey, this guy should be president. That probably wouldn't be enough all by itself to make you take that second jump of logic. But they did. The Israelites did. And again, all four Gospels agree that they did. They all immediately saw in Jesus something that could be used by them to get what they wanted. And I think that's interesting. I thought about that off and on all week long. I did. How could we talk about that? Because that's curious, that they would make that jump. Because Jesus never really talks that way. That you follow me, it's all going to start getting rosy. He never really presents it that way. And you follow me, and we'll be rough together. We'll start an army. He never really does. And so I started looking for the things that Jesus does say on Palm Sunday. Did he amp it up a little bit? And he kind of does in one place. Like the Pharisees tell him. When he's coming in one place, in one of the Gospels, he immediately goes and clears the temple out, which that's kind of an aggressive move, right? I mean, he goes immediately and starts knocking. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he does that. And so he probably did do it. He probably cleared the temple out. And in that, when he's doing that, the Pharisees say, you need to restrain your disciples. And he says, if I tell them to be quiet, the stones will start crying out. And so you could say, okay, well, he's amping it up, right? So I started reading all the different things he's saying. Did Jesus ever do that? And I ran across this section in John. John has Jesus teach a big section there after he comes into the city. And he kind of clears up again, this is what I'm about, and this is what I'm trying to do, and this is who I'm trying to be. And again, I just wonder how they missed it. And it made me think maybe we could miss it, what Jesus is talking about. So I wanted to talk about that if I could. And if you want to follow along in your Bibles, it's in John chapter 12, starting at about verse 20, but I'll have it on the screen here too. And if you would rather follow along that way, that's fine, whichever way. But it says in John chapter 12, verse number 20. Let me see if I can pop that up. He says, there were some Greeks amongst them. And when it says Greeks, the Jews called anybody who didn't live there either a Gentile or a Greek. If you weren't from there, you're either a Gentile or a Greek. That's how they refer to people. And so they may not really be Greeks. They're just foreigners, outsiders, people who weren't normally there. And some of those outsiders came, and they came for the festival. Josh, I remember a couple weeks ago, Josh was preaching. He said that the city would explode in population during that time. 2 or 3 or 4, maybe even more times the number of people would be in the city. People sleeping on the streets, under bridges, camping out on the hillsides around the city, and it's just crazy and packed and crowded. And in that big, crazy, packed, crowded group, some people who are outsiders, they say, "Well, we'd like to see Jesus. We just saw the parade. Could we get close enough to talk to him? In our day, maybe get a selfie with him or have him sign a shirt or something. And so, can we get in there close to Jesus?" And so Jesus hears about it and immediately speaks up. He says, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. And when I first read it, because where my head was at, I think, well, there you go. He's amping it up, see? He's coming on that parade, and now he said, okay, now you can see all my glory. But he immediately shifts. He says, very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, It just remains a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. And you could read this as just like a philosophical mumbo jumbo, but he's trying to illustrate something. You put a seed in the ground, and that seed doesn't technically die. You bury it like you'd bury a dead thing, but it's not really. But his point: put the seed in the ground, it dies, and then it makes a lot. But if you just keep the seed in your hand, it's just a seed, right? You have to bury it and let it die so it can become something else. That's it's not great biology, but that's the point he's making, and that's true. Right? We see that in terms of how nature works. And so he's talking about himself. And so immediately here, when he's saying, I'm going to be glorified, what he means is, I'm going to have to die. And he's got an agenda for dying. He says, if I die like that, I'm going to produce. I mean, if I allow myself to die that way, people are going to come to God. People are going to be remade. People are going to be reborn. And then he says, anyone who loves their life will lose it, while anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Now, he says this about 10 different ways through the Gospels. This phrasing, he says it a couple, you change a word or two here or there, but this same idea, this pops up a lot. It pops up enough that you could probably say this is kind of one of Jesus' rules of life. This is how life works. He says, and so it's more than just him. That same seed analogy, but it's more than just him. It says, anyone who tries to keep their life, like a seed in my hand, nothing. They don't produce anything. They're not going to be anything. But anybody who hates their life, and again, he's not talking about a suicidal impulse. It's about control, right? It's about letting Jesus drive the car of your life. Pause there for a second. How many of you is that hard to let someone else drive? Just think about that. You don't have to raise your hand. There's one raised their hand. Somebody pointed at somebody else there in the back. I'm not going to say who it was. All right. It's hard for me to let somebody else drive. And I'm not ashamed to say it. The reason is I think I can do it better than any of you. That's the reason why it's hard to let anybody else drive. And I don't panic when you're driving. I've ridden with guys like that. You get them in your car and you're driving and they're just nervous the whole time. Every time you go to a corner, they're hitting an imaginary brake or they're holding the sides of the car. I don't do that. I just immediately lose interest in the whole trip. If you're driving, I fall asleep. I have a hard time staying awake. I just can't. You don't do it right. So it's easier for me to close my eyes and pretend like I don't understand it. Okay, if you're like that with your life, right? Jesus is saying, you've got to let me drive. You've got to let God drive. And if you try to hold on to your life and I'm going to protect and be comfortable and in control, you're going to lose in the end. But if you let him have control, you get much more back. And it's such an important thing to understand as a Christian. But I think most of us miss it, or at least miss it during long seasons of our life. There's something broken in me. There's something warped in me. And I can't do the things that I want to do. And it'd be different if we were talking about things that I didn't really want to do to begin with. Right? Like Julia and I are talking and she says, hey, we could take dance lessons. We could, I say. Really? When? I'm busy that weekend. But which weekend or how much? Oh, we not got money for that, I don't think, right now. I mean, if I don't want to do it, I understand why I get away from that. But I mean, there's things that I really want to do. I mean, I'm hungry to do it. I mean, when our kids were first born, and I'm just looking at them, I wanted to be like the best dad. I had imagined other kids would come to our house, and other kids would look at me and say, why can't our dad be like you? Well, it's hard, and I don't know. Not everybody can do it. And things that I want to do, right? And then I can't do it. And it's stupid stuff. It's the old song about, hey, Dad, can we throw or pitch? And not today, son, the cat's in the cradle. And I did that stuff, How could I be too tired for this moment? But I was, and it's just gone. And there's 1,000 things like that. And these are the things that I want to do. It's not like dance lessons. I mean, these are the things that I aspire to be. Why is that so hard? And it doesn't matter if it's big or small. You know, avoiding Little Debbie's at a gas station. That shouldn't be hard, right? It should be easy. Why is that hard? I mean, and the things that I want to do, I have a hard time doing. There's just something broken in me. And if I try to drive my own car, I know where we go. But why is it so hard to let him drive it then? And so Jesus says, now's the time for me to be glorified. He says, you put a seed in the ground, it produces, and anyone who keeps their life and they don't give it away, they're going to lose everything. But the one who loses their life, who plants themselves in God, they're going to get much more back, and they're going to produce much more. You got to follow me, he says. This is where we're going. I think about all the different things that Jesus has done for me, right? I mean, some of the things you think of really fast. Like, because of Jesus, I don't have to worry about dying. I don't have to worry about my future. That's secure. I don't have to worry about my loved ones. You know, if I talk to them about the Lord, it's more subtle than that. When I first became a Christian, it's like everything kind of fell into place. I understood how the world worked when I became a Christian. You could see that warped thing that was in me is in everybody. And why are certain people so mean, or why do certain people have such a hard time getting along, or why is this one so difficult? It's how we are. And once I started to see how Jesus could save me from that, and how he could bring me out of that, and could bring other people out of it, well then, what Jesus did for me, I could be a conduit to help do that for somebody else. Right? I mean, and that's what he's saying here, that he's the first one to do it. The time has come for him to be glorified, and I'm going to put my life in the ground and make a lot of, but he says, but if you're following me, that's what you're going to do. And ever since Jesus died, that's what we do. And it has affected this world. It has affected how we think. It's affected how we operate. It's affected how we treat people. It's affected how we see people. And even people who aren't close to Jesus at all will use Jesus' logic to figure things out. A person who does not care about God at all, gets angry to talk about religion, will still feel like people have rights. And that's a Jesus idea. Or that people's body, that you're to be respected, that your body's a temple, and that's a Jesus idea. That's not how people thought before Jesus. And he's changed us. And there's still something broken in us, but he can change us. And anyone who wants to follow after him, this is where we're going. He said, now's the time for judgment on this world. And the prince of this world, meaning the devil, is going to be driven out. Jesus said, I came to change it all. He said, and when I'm lifted up from the earth, I'm going to draw all people to myself. And he said this to show which way he was going to die. When he says lifted up, he means on a cross. When I'm lifted up, that cross is going to change everything. There will be people wearing gold crosses on their neck 2,000 years later because of what I'm going to do. You watch. He doesn't say it like that, but that's what happens. You put me up on that cross, it's going to change everything. And he says this to show how he's going to die. And you could think, well, it's kind of a mysterious way to say how you're going to die. What if the people missed it? But they didn't miss it. The crowd speaks up. Hey, we've heard the Messiah is going to live forever. So what are you talking about? You've got to be lifted up. They know what he's saying. So who are you, Jesus? And Jesus kind of, again, gets philosophical. He says, you need to enjoy the light just a little while longer. You need to walk in the light before darkness overtakes you. And here he's talking primarily about the idea that he's bodily only going to be here for a few more days. You need to get yourself right. But it still speaks to us, this verse, even though he's been Easter and resurrected and in heaven for years and years and years, it still speaks to us. You don't have forever to figure this out. The clock is always ticking. Life is speeding by. And you've got to decide what to do with Jesus. He says, whoever walks in the dark don't know where they're going, but if you believe in the light while you have the light, you can become a child of the light. And he's asking you to come into what he's doing. He's laying his life down for us and asking us to come and lay our lives down for everyone else. And after he said this, some people said no. They said, no, we don't agree. And he'd done a lot of signs, it says, in their presence, but they just, no, I don't think so. And it's because of what he's asking. It's not because they don't think he can do things. They see that he's doing things. That's why they had the parade. They just don't, I don't think so, Jesus. And this was all predicted. There's a verse in Isaiah, Lord, who's believed our message? To whom has the alarm of the Lord been revealed? That thing in the quotes, that comes from Isaiah 53, which if you're familiar with your Bible on that part, Isaiah 53 is about the suffering servant, how one day God would send a person to die for the nature, how one day God would send Jesus to die for everybody else. And at the very beginning of that Isaiah 53, there's that verse that's in quotes. Lord, who's believed it? I mean, people are going to see it, and not everybody's going to want it. It's going to be a different view. This idea that I've got to lay myself down, the idea that I have to lose to win, some people aren't going to dig it. At the same time, some people did. So, okay, yeah, Jesus, we see what you're saying. They believed in him. But because of the Pharisees, because of the important people in their community, they would not openly acknowledge their faith for fear of being put out of the synagogue, because they love praise from men more than praise from God. And I think about a verse like that, and that hits me hard, kind of, because I could be that way too. And I don't follow like I should, because I'm scared people will think I'm silly or stupid or uninformed. People will think that I'm not to be listened to, and so I'm scared to speak up. And he asked me to lay my life down, and I want the benefit of being with Jesus, but I'm scared to lay my life down and give it all to him. And I'm still a seed in a hand. It doesn't produce anything. And this was always the message that he had. And I don't know, I had read that before, but I had never really connected it to Palm Sunday. And it's the very next thing that happens. It's in John, it's the same day in John. When people are cheering for him and they're saying how great he is, he lays out the plan. This is the plan. This is who we're going to be. This is who I am. This is who I'm asking you to be. And it takes a lot of faith to trust Jesus on this thing. You know, this notion that I could lay my life down and in some way it would pay off. But that's what he's calling us to. That's who he expects us to be. Now, you see it work. I know if I were to interview each one of you, some of you had great parents who did this. They laid themselves down for you. They sacrificed, whatever you needed, they made sure that happened. They thought of themselves second over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. They put up with you. I had somebody ask me a few years ago, when did you learn you weren't cool? And that's when my kids started talking. That's when I learned I wasn't cool. I thought until then I kind of was. But no, turns out no. And now I was talking to another couple about this after the service, and he said, that's how our family is too. And we were talking about it. And I said, the weird part is the kids, they give it to Julia more than me. They'll tease her about being out of step with stuff more than they give it to me. And the couple I was talking to, she says, they do that to me too, but they do it because he'd get mad about it. And I think, well, yeah, I get mad about it. It makes me mad too. They say, you're not as cool as you used to be, Dad. I'm about to be a lot less cool, than I was even a few minutes ago. You think that was something? Watch this. Wait till I hug your neck after school one afternoon and kiss you on the forehead and say how great it is. See you again. Then how cool I'd be. Did kind of tick me off. Ticks me off a little bit now just thinking about it. But when you think about it, this is who we're supposed to be, right? A great parent does that. And even those of you who had bad parents or parents who weren't quite 100, because we're all sinners, right? All of you had sinners for parents. I mean, but we see that, right? We know that's what it's supposed to be. A great coach, a great teacher, a great leader. Every politician says this when they're running. I'm not running for myself. I don't care about the glory. I'm doing this to be your servant. Now, a lot of them are lying. That's not what they really want to do. But you want to believe it, don't you? Don't you want to believe that the ones who are your leaders in whatever capacity, in whatever role, are leaders, because that's the best leader, right? They think of us before they think of themselves. And Jesus is that way. And it's kind of a law for him. This is who we're going to be. And if you're going to follow me, this is who you're going to be. And we're going to be a community of people just lifting up the other one, thinking of ourselves second. We want to remake Jesus in our image. Most people think deep down that they and Jesus are pretty much on the same page with a lot of things. And you can make Jesus with a little twist here and there fit your agendas. You know, the conservative says, well, Jesus cared about life and purity and family, so he's more of a Republican. And the other side says, no, Jesus cared more about freedom and not being judgmental, loving everybody, so he's more on our side. He would be a Democrat. Jesus didn't come to take sides. He came to take charge. And he's all those things and none of them. He came to lay his life down to fix that broken part of us. And he calls us who are following in his wake to lay our lives down to help repair the broken part in this world. And they missed it. Jesus follows God's will even though it's going to be expensive. It would have been much easier the day of the parade to just let the crowd do what they do, to become king, to get a big house and an important staff and boss people around. That's always attractive. What a great thing that would be, to just be the man in charge. And Jesus rejects that path. He goes a different direction. He follows God's will even when it's really hard. The night before he's crucified, he knows what's coming. It says he prays so intently in the garden that he sweats. It's like drops of blood rolling off his head. He's just like he's so troubled by this. He tells the disciples, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. And he just has to pray, ask God if there's any other way. But not what I want, God. What you want. And that has to be our prayer if we're going to follow him. Not what I want, God. What do you want? Because I know me. I've lived with me long enough to know me. I know the broken parts of me. Don't you? And I'm not even talking about like some specific thing, like, you know, where you could have a time machine and go back and fix this one thing, because most of us have something like that, right? I wish I could go back and just that one breakup, you know, or that one accident when I did that one stupid thing, or that one time when I didn't say something and then the next day they were gone, and I'd give anything to go back and just say that one thing I need to say. That's painful enough, and most of us have at least a couple of those things. But it's just the day-to-day. I was having this conversation with my brother the other day, and we're just talking and having a conversation, and it has struck me as we're having this conversation that life is easier for him than me, because he's not as awkward as I am. He's not as angry as I am. He's just not as twisted as I am. And the more I thought about it, I started getting kind of mad at him, talking to him that you know, you've had life on easy mode all these years, and here I've been struggling with me, you know? I'm the difficult level. I'm the all-pro level. If you could live life like this, that's crazy. And I just don't think I'm the only person who feels like that. And Jesus came to redeem people like me. And he came to redeem people like you. And the seed was planted in the ground, and it produces, and you can be part of that big chain. That's what church is about. That's what the invitation's about. That's what this time's about. So at the end of the service, we're going to have a time where you can pray. And I'll be here in the middle, and there's people on both sides who will pray. Pray about anything. But especially if there's something going on in your life, in your orbit, let's pray about that. And we've had people come forward to say, I don't even know what I need prayer for. I just know I need prayer. Well, let's pray then. And we pray for you. There'll be somebody in the back there, and you can, if you don't want to come forward, people might see you. You can go back to the back and pray. You grab any of the leaders. If they have a name tag on, they're leader enough. Say, would you pray for me? And if they all act all freaked out and scared, it may be a short prayer. But there's still some advantage to that. Man, there's some power in that. The most powerful prayer you can pray sometimes is, God, save me. That's what they were yelling at on Palm Sunday. God, save me. And we want to give you a chance if you need to pray anything today to do that.